ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Eevee and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, I want to debunk something, and it's an issue that's been cropping up over the past, I would dare say, couple of decades. It's the issue of every black superhero supposedly having electricity powers. This is a very hyperbolic stance I've seen people take about black superheroes over the years, and it is not something that's just relegated to black people who read comics. No, I've heard tons of different people from different walks of life, different colors and creeds, even white people make this argument that all black people have electricity-based powers. And honestly, that's just not true. And I'm gonna tell you why. First and foremost, let's go ahead and take a look at the black superheroes who do have electricity-based powers. I'm gonna name some off and maybe even give a little bit of an explainer as to their powers to, help it make a little more sense. But let's first start off with one of the most popular of them all, and that's Static. His entire power set, as his name might imply, is based on controlling, manipulating, and creating electricity. So that's one right there. And then you also have Black Lightning, who, well, as his name would also imply, he controls and manipulates lightning. There's also the character Black Vulcan, who is basically Black Lightning, but for the Super Friends. So there's that. And then you would also count Black Lightning's daughter, Lightning, who can literally become lightning. I'm not gonna count his daughter, Thunder, in this, though technically she is electricity themed. Her power is actually something completely different. There's also characters like Thunderfall, who's able to unleash electric blast. There's also the character Spider-Man, the Miles Morales edition of the character, who can unleash electric Bioblast outside of having his normal spider powers. There's also the DC Comics character Thunderer of Earth 7, who, while technically he has the ability to control weather, overall electricity is a part of that, so we can technically count this character as well. We also have the character Aqualad, the Calderon edition, or the Jackson Hyde edition, you take your pick, but either of these characters can channel electricity. There's also Monica Rambeau, aka Spectrum, aka Photon, and a former Captain Marvel. She, despite having so many different powers, many will point to her control of the electromagnetic spectrum, but it is just one of but many powers that she has. There's also the character Jakeem Thunder of DC Comics, who doesn't per se have lightning powers, but his name is electricity themed. His power has nothing to do with electricity. He just happens to have a genie at his command who is lightning themed, but his power is actually to make wishes. It has nothing to do with electricity. Now, the reason I'm going to include Jakeem in the list of characters who have electricity powers, despite the fact he actually doesn't have them, is largely due to the source of his power, having electricity-based powers. I'm also going to include the Legion of Superheroes characters, Lightning Lad and Lightning Lass. Now, I'm not talking about the 1980s iterations of these characters. Those characters were white, but in 2019, the Legion of Superheroes was reintroduced to the DC Comics universe, and since that reintroduction of these two characters, both versions are now black. And as their name might imply, they have electricity-based powers. There's also the Marvel Comics character and X-Man, Storm, who has weather powers, but just like with Thunderer, she is largely associated with electricity, and she has an electricity-themed name, so we're gonna throw her in the lot as well. There's also the recently introduced character Bolt, who is a derivative of Black Adam and has about roughly the exact same powers. Speaking of Shazam-like characters, there's also Darla Dudley, who is one of the Shazam family and has, while technically more of a focus on superhuman speed, she also has the same electrokinesis powers that Shazam does. There's also Wallace R. West, aka Kid Flash, who also has the same powers as all of the other iterations of the Flash, like Barry Allen, Wally West, so on and so forth. And while once again, like Darla Dudley, his thing is more superhuman speed, he does have the ability to channel and discharge electricity. I'll also even throw in the character Bumblebee. While electricity isn't the overall main feature of her power, she does have the power to unleash electric blasts that work in about roughly the same way as a supercharged bee sting. And I'm also gonna bring up Volt from the comic Irredeemable, and largely because while he does have electricity-based powers, he's also kind of one of the reasons that this trope became a little bit more popular. The trope was addressed in this 2009 series, specifically in Irredeemable number 5, which was written by Mark Waid. There's a point in the comic where Volt takes down a masked criminal with his electric-based powers, and he calls out the trope while he's doing so, basically saying, surprise, I'm a black superhero with electrical powers. I know. And while this gag is largely been taken up by many comics readers to be 100% fact, the truth of the matter is, not every black superhero has electric powers. And I know there's going to be some people asking, why have I not included the character Livewire in this list of characters? That is because Livewire does not have electricity-based powers. Her name is electricity themed, her power is not. Her power is to control technology, and that power is 100% psionic in nature. These are mental powers. Yes, controlling technology, it's electricity adjacent, but it's not electricity powers. The truth is, not every black superhero has electricity powers. There are more black superheroes without electricity powers than there are those who have them. And since I already named 2 who don't, we're gonna start the counter at 2 and then go from there. I could point to characters like Luke Cage, who has nothing to do with electricity. He has unbreakable skin and superhuman strength. There's also Blade, who, once again, no electric powers, just a half human, half vampire. There's Black Panther, who has the heart-shaped herb that gives him superhuman agility, strength, speed, stamina, durability, and all that good stuff. Plus, he has a vibranium suit. There's also Nubia, who has the same exact powers as Wonder Woman, which none of that involves electricity. There's characters like Icon, who is basically Black Superman. There's Hardware, who is basically Black Iron Man. There's the character Rocket, who has a belt that grants her the ability to create kinetic energy shields and kinetic energy blasts. Misty Knight, who has no real actual powers at all, just a cybernetic arm. There's Cyborg, who is literally what his name says on the tin. There's also Steel, both the John Henry Irons and Natasha Irons versions of the character, who are more or less Black Iron Man by way of Superman. There's both Green Lantern's John Stewart and Joe Mullen, who possess Green Lantern power rings that allow them to create whatever they can imagine. There's also Naomi, who is, for all intents and purposes, a black teenage version of Captain Marvel in terms of power set. There's Captain America Sam Wilson, otherwise known as Falcon, whose powers include both being able to fly thanks to having technological wings, as well as having limited telepathy, which only really works on birds. There's also War Machine, once again, Black Iron Man, but with more guns. There's Vixen, who can literally take on the power of any animal that she can imagine. There's Bishop, who his whole power is to take kinetic energy fired at him and redirect it back at whatever he wants. There's Prodigy, who literally knows everything and anything that someone around him knows. There's Gentle, whose entire power set is increasing his muscle mass and his strength. Batwing, who is, for all intents and purposes, just Black Batman. There's also his brother Jace Fox, who also is Black Batman. There's Nick Fury Jr., who is just Black Nick Fury. I mean, he's basically what Nick Fury is in the MCU. There's Bloodwind, whose whole power is basically being Magic Superman. Blue Marvel, who is basically Black Superman, but also with Green Lantern powers. There's the character Ant, who can literally do whatever an ant can other than be small. There's Battalion, who is basically Black Cable without the time travel drama. There's the Crimson Avenger, whose whole thing is shooting people with magic bullets. There's Maggot, who literally has 2 cybernetic maggots and hang around on him that can eat pretty much anything. There's Oya, whose whole power set is anything but electricity. She can control fire and ice. There's the character Sync, who can literally have any power anyone around him has. There's Tempo, whose whole power is manipulating time, whether it's forwards or backwards, or slowing it down or speeding it up. There's Silhouette, whose whole power, as her name implies, is controlling and manipulating shadows. There's Manifold, whose whole power is speaking to the universe, and this also is used largely for teleportation. There's Spawn, who has necroplasm and necromantic, as well as other weird supernatural abilities. There's Frenzy, who has superhuman strength and durability. There's Debris, who has telekinesis, but can only really use it to manipulate small objects, but she can manipulate a ton of those small objects at one time. There's Darwin, whose power is just that he can adapt to anything. Superman Val Zod, who is basically Superman but black. There's also Calvin Ellis, President Superman, who is basically Superman but black. There's also Sunshine Superman, who is basically Superman, but once again, you guessed it, black. And last but not least of those, Superman of Earth D, who, once again, Superman, but black. There's also Ironheart, who is a teenage black female version of Iron Man. There's also the character Nighthawk, who's basically like a hardcore version of Batman, but black. There's also Night Watch, who is a Marvel Comics version of Spawn, albeit not an entirely supernatural-based character, but still, the energy is very much Spawn at the height of his popularity. Wild Streak, whose power is mainly just superhuman agility, strength, stamina, durability, and so on by way of an exoskeleton. There's also the old Youngblood character, Sentinel, whose power was, for all intents and purposes, being a black Iron Man minus the helmet. There's also Black Panther's sister Shuri, who has the exact same powers and abilities as T'Challa. There's also the newly introduced Wakandan character, Tosin Oduye, who does not have any electric-based powers at all. His powers are vibranium-based. There's also Encantu, the Living Mummy. His powers are more focused in the region of superhuman abilities like strength, stamina, and he also possesses immortality and other necromantic abilities. Speaking of magic-related things, there's also Dr. Voodoo, who, once again, while he can channel electricity in the same ways that some other black characters are tropically known to do so, that's a bug, not the feature. His overall power is just magic in general. Does he let off a lightning blast every now and again? Sure, he probably does. But once again, he does not focus on that, so I'm not counting him either. There's Skyrocket, who uses a technological suit to affect superhuman abilities. There's also Martha Washington, who's a freedom fighter in the future. There's also Mr. and Mrs. Terrific, who don't have electric-based powers at all. Their power is that they have a natural aptitude for having natural aptitudes. They're just really smart people. I've just named off a lot of characters, and I still haven't named off even half of the black characters in existence in both Marvel, DC, Image, and various other imprints. Hell, I'll even give us a Black Lightning round. Pun intended. Monet, Sunspot, Dark Veil, Third Eye, and Triage, Bling, Phaser and Longstrike, Necra and Cypher, Kidogo, Night Thrasher, Windshear, Centennial Goblin, and Pathway, none of which have anything in the neighborhood of electricity-based powers. All in all, that should be 73 black superheroes without electricity-based powers, versus 19 who do. Now, one piece of ground I'm willing to concede is that the electricity-based power superheroes that are black, are they more popular? Yeah, by and large, they usually are. Most of them are, and it's really, I think, honestly, more a coincidence than it is anything else. Truth is, despite many black people rallying against this trope of the electrical Negro, a lot of black folks really like these characters. They back these characters up nearly every chance they get and stand these characters to the point that any slander towards them, no matter how valid, is typically met with anger and calling yo mama out her name. And if you are the black person criticizing the character, your black card might even get pulled. The truth of the matter is, it's okay if a lot, and by a lot I mean less than a third of all black I would even dare say a quarter of all black superheroes have the same or similar powers. Hell, more than a quarter, and I dare say closer to half of all white characters have superhuman strength and vulnerability plus white privilege. So, I mean, let's be real. Most white superheroes are basically just a poor man's version of Superman in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And yet, no one complains about that. And white superheroes make up the majority of all superheroes. The trope is honestly just really overplayed. It's an unnecessary trope, and while yes, there are quite a few characters that do fit that trope, it doesn't mean that it's a problem, because it would only be a problem if literally more than 50% of the heroes that were black had electric-based powers, and that is clearly not the case. Just because you see a lot of one thing doesn't mean that that's always the only thing that's going on. I know that perception is 9/10 of reality, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the empirical evidence. Truth of the matter is, and let's just admit this to ourselves, black people as a whole largely like black characters with electric-based powers. Let's just be honest with ourselves on that one. Not only that, the rest of the world seems to really like them too, and I don't think that there's a problem with that. Now, are these characters better written? Are they cooler? That part is kind of debatable, because honestly, I feel like a lot of black characters who don't have electric-based powers are written very well, drawn very well, depicted very well, but oftentimes aren't as popular because of one reason or another. Maybe it's because they're not on the X-Men. Maybe it's because they don't happen to be in the same book with a more popular character. There's a lot of reasons why this could all be going on, but at the end of the day, the fact is that this is not a thing, and honestly, I kind of feel like this is just unnecessary. It's an unnecessary trope that people like to bring up on social media to get others riled up. That is all it is. There's other black hero tropes people will claim are ever present in comic books, and while some are vaguely spot on, it's not like every black superhero has metal limbs or a whole metal body like Jackson Cyborg, nor is every black superhero derivative of a white counterpart. These are just myths that people who don't really read comics pull out their asses to sound like they have an argument. And while I say that perception is 9/10 of reality, I'll also go on a limb and say that the reason why so many people don't realize there's so many black superheroes in comics, I would go on a limb and say it's because they don't know about these characters. I know lots of black people who love comics and don't know about even a third of the characters I just named off. I know about these characters because I go looking for them, and in a lot of aspects, I just knew about them because they just happened to be in the comics I read more often than not. But I think that the actual problem isn't the fact that so many black characters have electricity powers, because it's not. The problem is that the characters who don't have electricity-based powers don't get put in front of readers as often as they should. So it's actually more indicative of a bigger problem. The problem, while it is named every black character has electricity powers, the real problem is that every black character you know about has electricity powers. That is the real problem, and both Marvel and DC, as well as other imprints, could do a much greater job in taking that problem and getting rid of it by showing you that there are these other characters out here, dozens of which I've already named off in this video alone, you could be reading that they're not putting in front of you. But the thing is, we can't wait for that representation to be given to us. We can't wait for that representation to be put in the forefront. So it is up to us to make it incredibly clear to all these comic book imprints that this is what we want. We have to go to them and say, yes, we want more Monica Rambeau. Yes, we want more Mr. Terrific. Yes, we want more of Joaquin Thunder. You have to say this to them, and you have to also vote with your dollars when you do so. And that, while it may not be the magic bullet that cures the entire problem, but I think it goes a long way towards ensuring that when the next time you hear someone say that every black superhero has electricity powers, there'll be more people willing to step up and combat that argument with the indisputable fact that that is not true. You guessed it, obligatory channel outro time. If you're not subscribed to the channel, consider doing so. Clicking that subscribe button and tapping that notification bell ensures that you get more videos just like this one, and you don't miss any of my other content that I drop throughout the week, plus my live streams every Thursday and Saturday. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure you click that like button, keep it plus ultra, and sound off in the comments.